Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks podcast, a show designed to give you insight into the world of self-publishing and marketing your books. I'm Shanon, writing under the pen name of SC Huston, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Ben Pick.
And I'm Morgan Lee.
And today we're speaking with Troy Lambert, who's going to talk to us about Plottr. We're recording this in April of 2023, but this episode won't air until September, which will actually be after the authortube writing conference that occurs in June this year, where Troy's also going to be presenting live for Plottr, and we'll get to learn more about this software then as well. But if you haven't seen their presentation, we'll link it below so you can watch that. Before we jump into our interview today and learning more about this awesome software, do you guys have any news or points of interest that you would like to share?
Wow. As you mentioned, this is coming out in September, and I have not thought that far ahead. So all I have is every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, I post questionable writing advice through running metaphors as running to write. Hope to see you there.
On YouTube.
On YouTube, thank you.
And then if all goes according to plan, my third book in my trilogy, Seed Among Good Ground, will be releasing next month. October 23rd is the date for that. So the pre-order link and everything should be up and available at the time that this airs. So look forward to that.
And for me, I'm not sure, again, September is a little bit far in the future. And it's not that I don't have plans, but my plans have, different routes. It could be A, B, or C, depending on how things go. I will have already concluded my Kickstarter for the first book of my next series. My second book should be done at this point. And if the Kickstarter goes well, I may not be publishing the second book until next year, but I won't know until we see how the Kickstarter works. So now let's get into our topic for today, starting with our guest, Troy Lambert. Troy is a mystery author, book editor, and the education lead for Plottr, the #1 visual book outlining and story Bible software. The author of over 25 novels and several works of nonfiction, Troy lives in the mountains of Idaho with his wife and 2 very talented dogs. And besides being the education lead for Plottr, Troy also uses the software in his writing. So let's talk about Plottr. Plottr is the popular visual book outlining and story Bible software used by nearly 20,000 writers, plotters, and pantsers alike. Plottr lets you easily arrange and rearrange your scenes, plots, and character arcs so you can quickly find your way to the end of your tale. No corkboard required. And welcome, Troy.
Well, thank you for having me. That's a wonderful introduction.
Yeah, well, I think you can probably think, did Roland put that together?
Probably, yeah. Probably his masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, for those who have never heard of Plottr before, is there anything else that you would like to add to what we've already said about Plottr and what it offers for writers?
Well, primarily, I call it like a story management software, although SMS is taken by someone, so I don't know who got ahead of me on that one. But so it allows you to not only use the visual outlining aspect, but also a series Bible aspect, which we'll get into a little bit. And for me, the biggest thing about Plottr is efficiency. It makes you faster, and it makes the entire process of writing, including revision, more fun. And so for me, that's one of the most important things about it.
Making revision more fun sounds like a good plan, because that's my least favorite part of writing a book.
That is often true, but I've learned to enjoy it more, but that's because I've developed a process around that follows me throughout, from the planning process all the way through the revision process, and it makes everything just much smoother and faster, and for me, that makes it more enjoyable.
Okay. And so I know that we have that little introduction that says it's for pantsers and plotters alike. So I know we have a question, what types of writers would benefit the most from using Plottr? So of those, and then we also have plantsers. I don't know if that's something that's been talked about in regards to Plottr, but yeah, I mean, what are the benefits for these different types of writer, and which one does it benefit most?
So which one it benefits most is a really tough question to answer, because it's a matter of the people it benefits the most is the people who are looking for a way to change or improve their process and are looking for a tool, a technology tool that helps them do that. So it's kind of all levels of writers and kind of all across the spectrum of writers. But typically, the way discovery writers or pantsers or even plantsers, that kind of the blend of the two, the primary way they benefit is that revision process that I talked about. Because to me, when you're a discovery writer, when you write the first draft, that is not the first draft. That is a zero draft, or what you could call an outline draft. Congratulations, you told yourself the story. Now you need to figure out what it is that you have here. It's kind of like when you do Nano and you sit down and you write 50,000 really messed up words, and then you go, okay, now what do I do with this blob of text that I have created in November? Well, you go in and tear it apart and put summaries of the scenes that you've written on some kind of a plot line, like in Plottr, and then that allows you to analyze what you've written and see, what do I actually have here? Do I have a story? Are these scenes in the wrong order? Do I need to move them around? What do I need to delete? What plot holes do I have? And then the revision process, when you rewrite that second draft, goes much faster, because now you have a direction and an understanding of what you actually have in front of you, instead of just going through and then rewriting it again and going, well, now I solved that plot hole, whole, but I created another one. And so you end up writing 4 or 5 drafts. And in today's publishing market, that's just not a very viable strategy. If you want to do this for a living, and not everyone does, but if you want to do this for a living, that's not a very viable strategy. It's going to take you too long to create a book.
So I have just recently realized about myself that that's like the reverse outlining. And so that's what it sounds like. Plottr will help, because I'm more of a pantser, would help me with my reverse outlining of my story.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, and you people call it reverse outlining. They call it, there's any number of names for it, but what it basically is that process of analyzing what you have in front of you. And this is like, as writers, we don't always think about analysis, but I say, we tell you need distance from your work to self-edit, right? So people will be like, put that manuscript away for 2 months. And I'm like, no way, because clearly I like to eat. My wife likes nice things. So I need to make money, right? It's just the way things go, right? So I can't put a book away for 2 months and work on something else and then come back to it. I have to find a better way to get that distance from that book. And so I have specific strategies for revision, including tearing apart what I've actually written compared to what I plan to write, and doing an actual analysis and comparison of the two, and looking at, now what do I have and how can I improve this and make it better and make it ready to publish.
Interesting. What sets Plottr apart from other writing software on the market?
I think the simplicity and kind of the visual aspect of it. So for me, when I first got Plottr, which was in 2017, before anybody knew what Plottr was, I was probably one of the first 100 users in the country. And the reason I bought it right away was I was a person who used corkboards and whiteboards in my office, plan things. I had arrows in different colors and string and push pins and, all the different things, right? But part of that was because I needed a way to visualize the whole thing. And I tried other things, mind mapping software. I've seen people use Excel. It really gives me like twitches and headaches when they do that. But I've seen people do it. That's wonderful if that works for you. So I tried different software. I tried Scrivener for planning. I like Scrivener for writing, and that's another topic. We'll get to that. But for planning, it just didn't work for me. The visual aspect wasn't working for me. And so probably the biggest thing for Plottr, it's a very intuitive visual aspect that allows you to see your entire plot at one time, but also allows you to do that tearing apart and analysis with like tags. And so it's like a digital corkboard on steroids. So the capacity for what you can use it for when you get into advanced features is actually just incredible. But the simplicity of that visual, I can see it. If there's a plot hole, I can point to it and see it, and it becomes undeniable, and definitely something I have to fix. So that visual aspect is huge.
How many plotting templates can be found on Plottr, and can you name a few of the most popular ones?
So there are over 30 now, and we are adding more all the time as we are able. And some of the most popular ones are Romancing the Beat, for instance, for romance writers. The action adventure or the hero's journey or the simple 3-act structure. Those are all really popular because the 3-act structure or the hero's journey can work for almost any genre. There's lots of other genre specific ones, the 12-chapter mystery formula, yada yada, those type of things. There's a sleuth journey that's based on the hero's journey only for mysteries. That's another one that's really popular. But the ones that are most popular are the ones that are either for romance, because romance, obviously the most popular genre still forever and always will be. But then the other templates that work for pretty much any type of fiction, action adventure, hero's journey, you can adapt all of those things to just, 3-act structure. You can adapt those to any genre. It doesn't really matter.
So I was just thinking of this is not a question we had come up with, but has Plottr come up with any of their own type of outlines or templates to use for outlines?
So sort of, yes. Like the sleuth journey, actually, I wrote that template because I adapted the hero's journey and I did it for myself, for my own writing, because I write mysteries. So I adapted it to the sleuth journey because I was like, what if I took the hero's journey and just changed the language so it made sense for mysteries? So we have developed some templates internally, primarily because most of our staff is also writers. So, this is why when you suggest a feature for Plottr, we go, okay, yeah, we got it. You don't have to explain it in real detail because we're writers, and we go, even if I don't use that, I can see how that would be useful to a writer. You know what I'm saying? So in saying we've developed some, yes, we've developed some of those of the templates that are in there we have developed from other literature and then, brought it in and adapted it for Plottr in-house as far as our staff doing it. But that's because our staff is made of writers. So.
Gotcha. So besides the templates, the visual timeline seems to be popular with users. And it's the one I hear most people talking about. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So basically the visual timeline section consists of plot lines, which you can change the color, and then it consists of your story structure, which can be adapted to any way that you want. We've actually just released an act structure so that you can actually have an act level, a chapter level, a scene level for that visual timeline part of it as well. Or you can just write, like I write in beats, okay? So I create beats across the top. Some people do chapters, some people write by scenes. Doesn't really matter what your method is, you can adapt Plottr to work that way for you if that's the way that it works with your brain. And so that's probably one of the biggest things about the visual timeline section is that you can get an overall view of your story. You can create scene cards that have information about specific parts of your story, but at that same time, you can zoom out and see everything, and then zoom back in and zoom out, zoom back in. And that aspect of it allows you to see not only what's happening with the scene like you would in a normal outline, but where this scene fits in the overall story, which is where those story structures come in really handy, because you can see, is my inciting incident in the right place, or is my inciting incident happening 50% of the way through the book? I was just working with a coaching client yesterday, and her original outline, her inciting incident was probably 40% of the way through the book, and where the book ended was actually the midpoint of the book. And so we just moved everything, right? Because I'm like, why is this doesn't make any sense, because this is where the story starts. Let's just move everything, now write a new ending, and boom, you've got a new book. But I had another coaching client that basically the midpoint of her original outline was the end of the book. The second half of the book should have been a different book, right? And so we fixed that, because we could visually see, okay, the way this is structured doesn't make any sense, and it's not going to work for a reader. But if we shift this, and then now that second part becomes another book, well, now all of a sudden we've got a story, and this one actually works. So
Does that help with maybe seeing pacing too, as a story, the ebb and flow of the pacing?
you betcha. Yeah, what I do is you can create user tags of your own, and I create tags that say slow, fast, and medium. I mean, really creative there, right? But then I go through and I tag my scenes. When I summarize my scenes, I tag them, and you have to be honest with yourself, otherwise this isn't going to work, right? You have to be honest with yourself and be like, yeah, this scene is slow. It's exposition and it's slow, or it's all dialogue and it's slow. And then I go, okay, well, if I have 3 of those slow scenes in a row in the middle of a thriller mystery, nope, that's not going to work, right? My readers are going to put that down and go back on Reddit or Google or Quora or whatever, and they're going to totally be out of my book and never come back, right? So then I go back through and I say, okay, well, now how can I make that scene? How can I increase the pace of that scene? How can I make the reader invested? And how can I create hooks that drag them to those next chapters?
Aside from the visual timeline, are there any other elements that writers tend to use or find most useful within Plottr?
Probably the biggest thing is the series Bible functionality. And there's 3 aspects to that right now. And the first one is just notes and a place to house your research. But you can house the research that you have from several books in one single file, one single place. So you can house your entire series. Now, the longest series that I have in Plottr right now is 25 books, and 16 of them have been published. Okay? So obviously, that's a lot of characters and a lot of places and a lot of research to keep track of, because they're all mysteries. So every one of them has a different way of killing someone. So if you need any information on that, you can email me privately. But the ability there to see those by book, so I can filter that down to just the book I'm working on, or I can look at the characters from the whole series. So if I want to bring back that character from book 2, I don't have to go back and reread book 2 and figure out what color her eyes were, how tall was she, what was her personality like. Instead, I've got that all in one place in Plottr. I just click over there, and then I add her to the current book if I want to bring her into the current book, and she shifts over into that nice, neat little column. And then I can look at the characters that are from that book and say, okay, this is what I have, this is what I'm working with right now. But again, I have that ability to zoom out and see everything from the series as well. And it's the same thing with notes and with settings. So your notes and research, you can filter by the book you're working on, or you can look at the whole thing and you can say, oh yeah, I killed that guy in book 2 using this method. So maybe I don't want to use that method again, or maybe I want to say something that flashes back to that method as a part of this book, so that readers who have read the whole series go, oh, that's really cool, he referenced that. And people that haven't read the whole series might go, maybe I should go back and read book 2. So there's things that you can use that series Bible functionality for that save you hours of going back and looking. Even in the book that you're on now, you don't have to go back to chapter 2 and look at that description that you made of that person. Instead, you can just stay in your writing zone and basically be more efficient by not going down the Google rabbit trail that's going to lead you down, because you're going to see something in a sentence like, oh man, I should have researched that better. And pretty soon you're on Google, Reddit, and Quora yourself, and now you know everything there is to know about this kind of poison, but you still don't remember what color Susie's eyes were because you forgot, because you read that 30 minutes ago before you went down your rabbit trail on Google, right? So instead, we stay focused as we can in our writing space, and I just use Plottr on a separate screen as a reference, so I don't ever leave that space, that writing space.
So how customizable is Plottr? Can users create their own templates and different elements within it?
Yep, you can create your own scene templates, which we have several of those as well, your own character templates and your own plot templates, which is basically how I created the sleuth's journey. And now it became an actual part of the Plottr software, but I created it for my own fiction. And I said, hero's journey, mystery, let me fix those 2 things up. And then I saved it as a template, and then I could use that forever for my books. So some of my books that are novellas that are novellas in a series, I have a specific template for those, because there's certain things that go only with those stories. Like, you wouldn't want to use that template for any other story because it wouldn't make sense. I've got plot lines in there that are just related to that particular story. But for me, it makes it faster because I click on that when I start a new book and I go, okay, now I have everything here that I need and I don't have to recreate it. We also have a community template section on our website where you can share your templates. So if you created the greatest romance template ever and it makes romancing the beat look like, something from the 1800s, you can share that on the community template, and then other users can find that and say, hey man, this is a really great template, and they can download it and use it as well.
I really like that you're able to create your own templates, and it's easy to duplicate that for the next thing that you need, that it's not, you don't have to rebuild it all over again. That definitely makes it easier. And I'm on the lookout for a template that it combines the romance beats with fantasy beats. I've been looking all over the internet for that. So now I'm wondering if anyone has attempted that in the Plottr community.
You can make your own based on your novel.
That's right. This is what's interesting is like I'm writing another template right now where I'm changing romancing the beat to thrilling the beat, because it's actually a great template for thrillers if you change the language. Because if you think about the events that happen in romancing the beat and in a romance and the events that happen in a thriller, they're the same. Now the meet cute might be two guys shooting at each other, right? Instead of meeting in a grocery store or answering someone's Craigslist ad, which is the way my wife and I met. No, that's not true. She hears this. It's a joke, but anyway. But you know what I mean? I mean, that meet cute moment is not the same, but the outcome and the circumstances surrounding it are the same, where maybe the detective and the bad guy pass in an intersection, or something like that. There's all kinds of things that you can use that template for, but for our brains, we have to change the language. So what you find is that more story structure templates are the same than they are different. So if you said, okay, I want to, if I were you, I would stack the romancing the beat with probably the hero's journey, and then I would play with how those two coincide and create my own template where this is my fantasy part and this is the romance part, and I would integrate those two so that when I wrote a book in that particular series, I could just start with that template, and it would then I would be able to think about all the different aspects I need to consider as I'm writing that book, or in your case, in the revision process, if you pants that first draft in the revision process.
I mean, I wrote down all the beats from Romance and the Beat, and I wrote down like kind of a 3-act structure for the fantasy part, and then I figured out how I could possibly put them together, but I don't write like a whole outline. I just wrote bullet points for each, and they change because as I write, I change. Mm-hmm. So then after I was done, I had to go back and say, okay, well, that one didn't make it, and it's not going to work anymore. What else could I make that?
Well, and that's the beauty of Plottr. You could put that in, like so the way I start, this is going to sound really wacky, but and it's kind of an insight into my process, is I start with a template, right? And then I plan my outline, and then I delete the template. I delete that plot line, okay? Then I write what I write, and every day I go into Plottr and I summarize in a scene card what I wrote that day, that part that coincides with whatever scene I was supposed to write that day, right? So I do that, and then when I'm done, I add the template back in and go back and check my work and compare what I wrote to what I plan to write to the template. Because, I mean, writing for a living is like giving yourself English homework every day for the rest of your life. For some people, that's horrifying. For me, that's delightful. But this is a mechanical way to check my work without having to hire somebody to check my work for me.
Yeah, you can definitely see that. So how does Plottr also help with character development? And I know we've talked about story structure a little bit, so I don't know if you have anything more to add to that, but how does it help with those two things?
So there's the character section, but there are also over 20 character templates and different things that you can do, like give your characters personality tests. Now, personally, I like the Enneagram, because if you study it, basically you can also study how the different types would typically interact with one another. And so what that does is that gives you an idea of what would these people's relationship look like? What would the problems be? How would they butt heads if she's a 7 and he's a 9, right? Like how is that going to mesh up? How's that going to work and how's it not going to work, right? Or even in the case of a thriller or a mystery, like if the detective and the antagonist are two completely different types, that creates one kind of tension. If they're the exact same type, that creates another type of tension. As we know from real life, if you marry someone that's just like you or you have a relationship with them, there are going to be resulting conflicts, right? And we understand that as people psychologically. So there are ways to not only track things that are important, like your character's eye color and hair color and things like that, but their personality, the way they react to things, the way they react to other people. And you can track those in Plottr as well. And the big advantage of that is you can go back and look at, like, so if my characters have a conflict, I will paste some of that text into the character notes in Plottr. And then I will go back and I can look at, this is how they responded in that conflict. Have they grown as characters so they respond differently, or have they stayed the same? And so their responses very much mirror what happened there because they haven't changed, right? And so there are ways to just keep track of what your characters are doing, what they're thinking, but also why are they thinking that? What are their motives? What are their goals? And how does that then produce conflict, which is really what drives drives your story, because it's about, for me, it's about not only the external conflict, but the internal conflict. What's going on inside your head? Why is this antagonist doing these? Why is this serial killer still killing these people? Because if I can make it so that the reader is rooting for that serial killer almost, because they're like, they have good reasons for killing people, and I don't know if I want them to get away with it or not. And that detective, I like him too, and he has good reasons for wanting to catch people. I wonder who's going to win, and I wonder how I'll feel about it depending on who does. And so, or maybe neither of them wins, you know. And so there's all kinds of things that you can do, but that allows you to connect those characters to your reader and allows them to connect with the motivations and the goals, and then be invested in the conflict, rather than just, you know, a shoot 'em up thriller series where there's a gunfight and that's exciting, but we don't have that internal motivation behind it.
How does Plottr handle collaboration between multiple writers or editors?
Ooh, okay. So there are two versions of Plottr. One is Plottr Classic, which is an app you download on your computer, right? And so in that case, you can simply, as long as the other person's a Plottr user, you can simply send them a file back and forth like you would with any other software, right? But we do have a web app, which is called Plottr Pro, which is what I use with editing clients, and I'm also starting a new series with another author. And so we actually both use the same Plottr file, because with the web app, it's kind of like Google Docs. You can both have the same file open at the same time and watch what the other person is doing. Now, in the case with editing clients, what this does is I tear their book apart, I put it on a plot line, right? And then we have a Zoom call, and I say, dude, plot hole, and I point to it. And when they point to it, they can't deny it. They can't go, well, you know what I meant to say there was, it doesn't work that way, because I point to it, it's visibly there. But not only that, but at the same time, I can add a scene card underneath, type something in there, and they can see me typing it, and I say, this is a potential solution to that plot hole. So the hours that it saves you. So I have a few other editor friends who are doing the same thing. Like, we're using Plottr with our clients, and the reason is the hours that we save. First of all, you as the author will save money, because you don't have to pay me for hours that I'm not working, because I'm able to show you along the way, and becomes a collaborative process along the way, rather than me going through all of your document and then sending it back to you. Instead, we've got a collaboration along the way. So while I'm working on the rest of the document, you can be working on fixing that plot hole, and then we can come together at the end and we have a much better product much faster. So that's one of the ways that it works in the editing process. And I have a number of editors who are doing this, because basically you as an author are going to save money, and I'm going to like you more, because I'm going to not have to mess around with your stuff, 3 times. Instead, I'm going to mess around with it once, and it's going to be a faster, smoother process for all of us.
So in that respect, if you're using it as an editor, do you work with clients who are already using Plottr, or do you have them put it on Plottr, or how does that relationship work?
Some of both. Usually the first time someone works with me, they may or may not have Plottr. But what I will do is I create a Plottr file for them anyway. Then I get them on Zoom and I show it, I screen share it with them. And I say, this is what you should do, because this will make the process much faster next time. And here are some ways that we can use this software. Now, not everyone adopts it. I know it's a big surprise, but some people don't like certain types of software. Like I often tell people, I'm like, not everyone likes my teaching style. I know it's amazing, but not everyone does. Some people take classes from other people. It's amazing. Yeah. But anyway, but I mean, this is just the way things are, right? Some people don't like it as much, or it doesn't click with them as much, but most people it does, because of the visual aspect of it, things like that. And so most people can see the value of, hey, if I buy this and we collaborate back and forth, not only is it going to save me money, but it's going to make this process easier and a bit more fun. Then it's not like, instead I'm getting like feedback from an editor who tells me, hey, here is this is the way we can fix it, rather than getting a comment on a Word doc. It's kind of like a text message. Like, sometimes that can seem dry and a little harsh on my part as the editor, right? And I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to encourage you to keep writing, but we have to, there's also the aspect of I have to be honest with you, because it's better me than an Amazon reviewer later on. So if we can make that process more collaborative as we go and make that process faster and easier, everybody wins in the long run. So most people can see the value of that, and they jump right into that type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that, because I used to run my own business as a writing coach, where I was also mostly an editor for a lot of my clients. And Morgan also is an editor and offers that. So I found that curious that an editor would start that process on Plottr.
Yeah.
So while listening to several podcast episodes featuring Plottr, which I heard of Plottr for the first time on the self-publishing live show, I believe, with Mark Dawson and James
Mark
Black.
Dawson. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that was last year when I heard that. And then now I've heard it on a lot of other different podcasts that I regularly listen to. I started thinking of like ideas for questions, knowing that you guys were coming on our show. I started thinking, okay, what kind of questions can I ask that are different? And of course, AI programs are really booming, especially with Chat GPT, which came out for use for most everybody was like around November timeframe or October, somewhere in there. And so I was thinking about that. But then Kevin Tomlinson interviewed you guys back on March 23rd. And of course, he had to ask ask about AI in reference to Draft to Digital, and thought about, the day that he could upload his book to Plottr and an AI would create the series Bible from his book being uploaded to Plottr, which would be an awesome use of for me, that would be an awesome use of the AI, because then I don't have to worry about reverse outlining my stuff. It would do it for me. But another idea that came to mind for me was how an integrated AI could maybe possibly help the world building. So back with some of these other podcast episodes, I think the series Bible wasn't there yet, but it was talked about, and I'm assuming now it's there. You've talked about it a little bit and that would go into some of the world building, featuring, some type of AI in Plottr as part of the software that could help with the world building. I think might be useful, as in, for me, I write in older settings, epic fantasy settings. So I do a lot of research, in my current novel set in the 11th century, and I wanted to know about a government that could exist if the monarchy disappeared for 20 years. So I spent a lot of time just, researching this, but this was like something integrated into Plottr that would be easy to pull in that information right away. I don't know if that's something you guys have been thinking about, or if you guys have thought about Kevin Tumlinson's idea. Are there any ideas or any things that you guys are discussing about using AI with Plottr?
So we have ideas. I'll just preface this by saying there are a lot of people. I just wrote, if you're a member of NINC, I just wrote a huge article for their newsletter about AI. And the reason is there's a lot of authors and other people that are afraid of AI. They think AI is going to replace us and all that. No, it's not. And there's lots of reasons for that. If you've actually played around with AI, you will understand why it's not going to replace you. You don't have to do it for long to figure that out. But anyway, that being an entirely different topic, AI is still a great tool. And so there are some potential aspects. Now, one of the things that with research is that it's also, there's a part of it that's validating what AI tells you, because it's not always 100% accurate yet. There's some issues there that are things that just need to be fixed within that world. And it's not a simple matter of just fixing them. When it's I tell people that AI right now, like ChatGPT, is like a fuzzy JPEG of the internet. Like, you can see some things, it's not really clear all the time. You're not sure exactly what you're looking at, right? But there are some generative capabilities and idea generating capabilities that would be very interesting to have in Plottr, or where you could, like you said, upload your text and we could pull out of that. We could pull characters out of that. We could pull settings out of that. We could pull time periods out of that and help you create a series Bible. Again, you'd still have to go back and check and make sure, and you might have to format things a certain way, because what we find with AI is there are programs you can feed into AI, you feed your book into it, and it'll summarize it for you. And sometimes the AI gets a little bit creative in their summary because they don't understand exactly like some of the context or sarcasm or some of the things that you're talking about. And so they'll bring some character back to life in your summary, and you're like, they did, and things like that. So there would still be some manual work to it, but it would probably be something that's much faster. So have we thought about that? Yes. What is that going to look like? I have no idea. Like, there are things that we think would be good that we would love to do, but it's a matter of the time that it would take and deciding exactly how that would work and how it would integrate with Plottr. So yeah, but it's possible.
I can attest to that, because I've used ChatGPT. I've used it quite a bit, and I hire out my blurbs, but typically that means I have to write a summary of my book to give to the person I hire for my blurb. And I thought, well, what if ChatGPT can summarize my book for me? So I put the first chapter in there. First chapter, a guy's asking a girl to marry him. She's thinking no, but never answers. So I put it into ChatGPT. It tells me she said no. And I was like, okay, she doesn't say no. Can you redo this? And then she said yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because it doesn't understand some of the nuance, which is one of the reasons that AI is not going to replace people. If you have ever looked at a book that someone generated with AI and then did nothing with it, it's very repetitive and the descriptions are very poor. I mean, really, really poor, really bad, right? And the reason is that it's like predictive text on your phone. Like, it can only know so much, and it can only look back at so much of the text when it's creating new text and things like that. So it's like a writing helper that helps you with outlining, might help you with ideation, help you if you're stuck on a description. But if you copy and paste what comes out of AI into your book, good luck, right? Your editor is going to scream when they get that from you, because it's going to be terrible. So it's just like, until we have sentient AI that thinks like a human being and has emotions and also has intent. Like, AI does not have intent. It's not going out. It doesn't wake up today and go, I'm going to go write a novel, or I'm going to go summarize. It does not have that intent to create a story. So all of those things are things that humans do that AI does not do and is not likely to do anytime soon. So that's anyway. But there are some tools there, like summarizing and creating a blurb. But like, I've had hit or miss things with that, like create a log line for this book, a tagline for this book, and you feed in a bunch of text. And even if you do, like they usually say, your tagline comes from your first few chapters, so you feed in your first few chapters, and you still have to massage that output because it's not going to be 100% accurate, because AI is not, it doesn't have that deep understanding of story. It just doesn't have it. Again, not likely to have it anytime soon. So.
Right now, there are no plans for writers to use the program with writing books. If Plottr could partner with any software, such as what you mentioned earlier with Scrivener, so writers could move seamlessly from the planning stage to the writing, which program or programs do you think would work best, or do you even see that as a possibility in the future with Plottr?
It's definitely a possibility. So right now you can export and import from Scrivener. Both of those capabilities are there. Now there's certain formatting things you have to do if you're importing back from Scrivener, kind of to be expected. But we're actually working on making that better, making that import even better, right? But that being said, in an ideal world, I like Scrivener for writing, but primarily for psychological reasons. I do a lot of technical writing and editing in Word. So if I open Scrivener, my brain goes, oh, we're fiction writing, and it automatically goes to that thing. But software that's on the horizon is one of my favorites is Atticus, because right now it has a formatting capability that's really, really good. I mean, I'm an Apple user, so I've used Vellum for a long time, right? But since that's not available to PC users, okay, Atticus has some really good options for that. But they're also working on it as a writing platform as well. And I am watching that closely because, and one of the reasons is Scrivener's interface could really use an update, from whenever it was created years and years ago, right? It really has not been updated that much. It's not a very modern interface. I use it because it's familiar. But for someone who's brand new to walk into Scrivener, almost everyone I talk to that tries it goes, wow, that's really overwhelming. And I'm like, yes, it is, because there's all kinds of features that you're probably now in today's publishing market never going to use that are in Scrivener, right? You might, but you might not ever use them at all. We have different formatting software. We have different options, right? So Atticus is a much cleaner, neater interface. So I'm hopeful for what they're doing over there. And there are other writing programs out there, Novel Factory, Dabble, all those different kinds of things that I wouldn't necessarily use them for planning software because they don't really have the capability that Plottr has, but they would be fine for writing. And at the moment, the solution to that is to export into Word format, into docx format. You can import it into a lot of other writing software. But we would love to, an integration with Atticus would be something to be really cool to see, because theirs is web-based as well. If you had the web-based Plottr, you could probably go back and forth pretty easily. I don't write code, I write words. So I just tell the programmers I wanted to do this, and I hope I sacrifice, silicone chips or whatever it is their gods want, and hope that they create what I'm after. So.
What about the idea of adding dictation? Is this something that Plottr has already thought about, or something that might be added later?
So we thought about it, and if you use Plottr on the web application, you can actually do it already using whatever your OS's dictation software or your browser's dictation software is. So for Mac, you can actually use the voice dictate on Mac and dictate into Plottr if you're using it on the web app. For me, that's not as efficient of a tool in the planning process as it is in the writing process. But I could see how that could work for some people. So I certainly wouldn't discount that. But as far as having an actual integrated dictation feature, it's probably down the road a bit, but it's something that we would definitely think about, to have something native to Plottr. But right now, there are workarounds so that you can actually dictate into Plottr if you really want to do that.
Yeah, that was something I thought about, the dictation. I use dictation. I've been using a lot, and especially like in my world building and stuff, I've been using dictation to get more words down because I'm a very slow typer.
Oh.
So dictation has become very big for me recently. I'd say in the last year, it's helped me get more words done.
Wow, that's really good. So the reason dictation doesn't work as much for me is because I'm a very fast typist.
Yeah.
As I was telling you, I have a pinky that's never really healed right from a boxer's fracture, and I have about 85% use of my right hand, and I type 120 words a minute on average.
Oh wow, nice.
So for me, because there's two different kinds of speed, so I'll go off on a little tangent, pretty tiny little tangent, on dictation. So there's two types of speed that writers deal with. The first one is your actual physical typing or speaking speed, right? That's speed number one. The second one is your storytelling speed. How fast can your brain come up with the ideas that need to come out of your mouth or your fingers, right? When your storytelling speed matches your actual physical limitation speed, then you're at your optimum. That's your optimum speed. So for me, I'm not going to get much more than 120 words a minute from dictation because of my storytelling speed. My storytelling speed is rarely ahead of my fingers. Now, if I tried to handwrite a book, I would have problems because my brain would be 10 sentences ahead of my fingers, right? So that's why people would be like, dictation. Yes, dictation is great for a lot of writers, but it's not for everyone. And that's why it's the storytelling speed that you're combining with dictation. So for me, typing works still, as long as my fingers still work. I've never had any carpal tunnel or any issues like that, which is actually amazing considering the amount of words that I've typed over my lifetime. But I started when I was 8, believe it or not. But anyway, so those different types of speed. So when you combine those two different things, that's how you get your actual storytelling writing speed.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, my storytelling speed is way faster. On a good day, I can do 40 miles an hour. I can do 40 words in a minute, but I'm really, I stay around between 18 and 20 words a minute, but I am thinking way, and then I forget what I was just thinking. And I'm like, gosh, I don't know what that sentence was that I had in my head. It was perfect.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where dictation comes in. It becomes a really handy tool. And I can see how if you're thinking that way in the planning process, world building process, it could also be very useful. So it is possible, and an actual integration of something like that probably down the pike somewhere, but it'll come.
So Plottr is a tool for writers, but do you see a future where the software will include elements to help self-publishers? And I'm thinking back to that same podcast episode you guys did with Drafted Digital when Kevin Tomlinson suggested, partnering with someone or a company like Kindlepreneur for search keywords or, things like that.
So there's not I don't know there's plans for direct integration with something like that, although it's probably possible. But I use Plottr a lot for tracking things like tracking my marketing. So the chapter heads across are January, February, March. You can figure that out for yourself. Okay, what the rest of those are. But the plot lines then become, this is a monthly email. This is a launch email. This is a special sale email. And then I track those things like what I've done. And I'll track other different promotions as well. And I have attributes that I've created in those scene cards. So I'm not using the character notes at this point. I'm just using those scene cards. But within those scene cards, I have attributes like ROI, like the amount of money I spent, the number of books that I sold that I can attribute directly to that promotion, and how my profit comes out of that. And so I use it to track business things as well, not in an integrated sense or a conventional sense, but almost like a Kanban board, but with the attributes, the information that I want in there. So I can use that to make calculations. So when the opportunity to do another book sweeps comes up, I look in there and see, how did my last one do? What did I actually gain? What was my cost per book follower, let's say? And is that worth it to me? What's my return on that as far as sales are concerned? And then I can look at either doing that again or saying, no, I'm not going to do that one again. It wasn't worth the money, right? So there are other things you can do that are related to your self-publishing. When we did a nano seminar in November, and I actually created a template for people to track their eating during nano, because especially if you're doing a job, like for me now, nano is that's a daily thing, right? Except that November is always super busy for whatever reason. And I have one big conference in the middle of that month, every single November. Anyway, you're not thinking about your food, right? You're coming home from work, you're thinking, I got to make my 1,700 words. And so I'm like, why don't you plan your snacking and your food ahead of time for nano, even if you only do your meal planning for that month, but it gives you that thing ahead, and you can do it in Plottr. And then you just click over to a different file, look at what I'm supposed to eat, whatever tonight. And then you have it already made in the freezer, whatever it is that you do to prep for that, for those type of events and sprints like that.
I love that you shared that, because I had no idea. I've never heard of using Plottr in any other way other than as a writer, but using it in addition to supporting yourself as an author. So I really like that.
Oh yeah, I use it for everything. Because I've been using it so long, every now and then just a different idea will come to me and I'll just use it for that because I already have it. So I don't have to buy another tool. So I'm like, that's cool.
Are there any other upcoming features or updates planned for Plottr which writers or authors should be excited about, which we haven't already discussed here?
Yes. So we're creating a more advanced world building aspect of thing that's going to basically make the notes section, especially your research section, much more robust, along with adding the ability to create a chronological timeline that is separate from your book timeline. So like in your case, that would work really well because you can track the events that actually happened in the 11th century where that book is set separately from the events of your book. And then you can decide where those things fit in without interfering with this timeline to work on this timeline, but also some more advanced world building features as well. And we're actually coming up with a nonfiction mode as well. You can still use Plottr for nonfiction, but you have to be creative in the way you're thinking about characters and settings, unless you're writing a memoir, in which case characters and settings are just people and places, right? But if you're writing like an inspirational book or something along that line, you have to think of those as like concepts or different things like that. But we're coming up with a nonfiction mode that'll help you do that in a little more meaningful way that's more geared towards nonfiction writers.
So let's end our questions by asking, what is the best Plottr tip or trick for writers?
My favorite tip for people is just to start simple. Start with something simple and work your way from there. There's two things that I'll tell you. The first is that getting started, you really don't have to know much. Go on your plot line, create some scene cards based on what you're writing now or what you're planning to write, whatever the case may be, and just play around with it. See the different things that you can do with the features of Plottr, and then learn more of the advanced features as you go. And just like any other software, because an advanced feature is there doesn't mean you need to use it. I would say that most of us do not use all the advanced features in Word. Unless you're an editor, you probably have not used a macro today, right? Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to know how to use it. You have to learn how to use it. We have all kinds of tutorials and videos and documentation that teach you how to use all those advanced features, and you can certainly move there, but don't start there. Don't try to eat the whole thing, the whole meal in one bite. Just start one thing at a time and learn how Plottr can potentially integrate into your process, because that's going to to be unique to you, not to anyone else.
And those tutorials and videos for the process, you guys have some of that on a YouTube channel, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So
We
I
have
saw
a very robust YouTube channel, and we also, like, I've done a lot of interviews with authors about how they use Plottr. And so you can go on there and see, like, okay, this person started this way, and this is the template or the way that they use Plottr. But the most important moment in those videos, and the most important moment for you, is going to be what I call the and then moment. And the and then moment is when you say, I started with this and then. And you're going to tell me how you adapted it to your process. That and then moment is the most important moment you will have with any software or any part of anything that you add to your writing process, because you will find that people start with an idea that they probably took from someone else or whatever. They followed someone else's process, and then they made it into their own. And that moment is the most important moment that you will have related to Plottr.
Awesome. Well, you've answered all of our questions, but before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners and viewers how they can find out more about Plottr and what to do if they would like to try the software?
So the easiest way to start is just to go to plottr.com, Plottr without the E. Go to plottr.com. There's a 14-day free trial. We also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. If for some reason you try Plottr and it just absolutely doesn't work for you, first of all, let us know why, because we want to get better. So please do that. But also, there's really no risk. Like, there's no risk to giving it a shot. And then you can find us. We have a really robust Facebook group where we answer all kinds of questions. If you think I can answer your question, you can tag me in there and I will show up eventually and answer it for you. But as we said, we also have a YouTube channel with tons and tons of videos on there that you can check out. So just check out plottr.com, Google us. You'll find all kinds of information, and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us all this great information about Plottr.
Well, thank you. You're welcome, and thanks for having me.
And thank you to our listeners and viewers. September 15th, we'll be back with another author interview. And until then, we'll see you later. Bye, everyone.